Most people never realize the moment they lose their power. They think it happens when someone rejects them, ignores them, leaves them, betrays them, or stops loving them. But that is not the moment. The real moment you lose your power is much quieter. It happens when you begin chasing. It happens when you start running after someone's attention, someone's approval, someone's affection, someone's validation, or someone's respect. The strange part is that almost everyone does it. Intelligent people do it. Successful people do it. Good-hearted people do it. They convince themselves that if they just try a little harder, explain themselves a little better, become a little more useful, a little more attractive, a little more available, then everything will work out. Yet the harder they chase, the further peace seems to move away. And that is why what you are about to hear may completely change the way you see relationships, success, and even yourself. Because the Stoics discovered something thousands of years ago that most people still fail to understand today. The things you chase the most often become the very things that control you. And the moment something controls you, it owns your emotions, your decisions, and ultimately your life. Imagine a man standing outside his phone waiting for a message that never comes. He checks every notification. He replays every conversation. He analyzes every word. He wonders what he did wrong. He imagines different outcomes. Maybe he should have said something different. Maybe he should have been more confident. Maybe he should have been more interesting. Hours become days. Days become weeks. His attention is trapped. His peace is gone. His confidence slowly evaporates. What makes this story tragic is not that someone failed to text him back. What makes it tragic is that he handed over control of his emotional state to another human being without even realizing it. Now imagine a woman who constantly seeks approval from co-workers, friends, family members, and social media followers. Every compliment gives her a temporary high. Every criticism feels like a personal attack. She adjusts her behavior to please everyone around her. She becomes exhausted trying to maintain an image that keeps others happy. Yet no matter how much approval she receives, it is never enough. There is always another opinion to satisfy, another person to impress, another standard to meet. She is running a race with no finish line. And perhaps, if we are honest, parts of both stories live inside many of us. Marcus Aurelius understood this danger better than most people ever will. Despite being one of the most powerful men in the world, he constantly reminded himself that external things were not truly his. Not praise, not reputation, not admiration, not even the loyalty of others. He understood that if his happiness depended on those things, he would become a servant to them. Think about that for a moment. The Emperor of Rome, a man who commanded armies and ruled millions, spent his private moments reminding himself not to become attached to what he could not control. If someone as powerful as Marcus Aurelius feared the trap of external validation, how much more vulnerable are ordinary people today in a world built around likes, followers, status, and endless comparison? The first Stoic lesson is simple, yet incredibly difficult to practice. Stop chasing what does not belong to you. Most suffering comes from trying to control things that were never ours to control. We try to control how people see us. We try to control whether they stay or leave. We try to control whether they appreciate our efforts. We try to control outcomes that depend on countless factors outside our influence. Then we become frustrated when reality refuses to obey our expectations. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you clearly separate what is within your control from what is outside it. Your actions are yours. Your character is yours. Your choices are yours. But another person's feelings, opinions, and decisions belong to them. The moment you understand this distinction, a tremendous burden begins to lift from your shoulders, because you no longer waste energy fighting battles that cannot be won. Consider how many people spend years trying to convince someone to value them. They give endless chances. They tolerate disrespect. They explain themselves repeatedly. They sacrifice their standards. They ignore obvious signs. They continue investing in relationships that consistently drain them. Why? Because they believe persistence will eventually earn appreciation, Sometimes it does. Often it does not. The Stoics would ask a different question. Why are you investing so much effort into convincing someone of your worth when your worth exists independently of their recognition? That question can feel uncomfortable because it exposes a hidden truth. Many people chase others not because they love them, but because they need them to confirm something they have not yet confirmed within themselves. This is where things become deeply psychological. Human beings are wired for connection. We naturally seek belonging. We naturally want acceptance. There is nothing wrong with that. The problem begins when connection turns into dependency, when acceptance becomes a requirement rather than a preference, when another person's attention becomes the source of our self-esteem. At that point, we are no longer relating to people from strength. We are relating to them from need. And need has a strange effect. It often pushes away the very things it desperately wants to attract. People can sense desperation. They can sense when someone is seeking validation rather than sharing authenticity. They can sense when someone's confidence depends on their response. Ironically, the less you need approval, the more naturally attractive you become. Think about the most confident people you have ever met. Chances are they were not constantly trying to impress everyone. They were not begging for attention. They were not desperately seeking validation. They carried themselves with a quiet certainty. They knew who they were. They knew what they valued. They were willing to be misunderstood, rather than betray themselves. This is not arrogance. It is self-possession. And self-possession is one of the greatest forms of power a person can develop. Seneca warned that people suffer more in imagination than in reality. This becomes especially true when chasing others. We imagine rejection before it happens. We imagine abandonment before it occurs. We imagine judgment even when none exists. We create entire emotional storms based on assumptions, fears, and projections. Then we react to those imagined threats as though they are real. The result is anxiety, insecurity, and emotional exhaustion. Yet if we step back and examine the situation objectively, we often discover that much of our suffering was self-created, not because our feelings were fake, but because our minds filled in gaps with stories that were never confirmed. Imagine standing in front of two doors. Behind the first door is endless chasing, constantly seeking approval, constantly adjusting yourself to fit expectations, constantly worrying about what others think. Behind the second door is something entirely different. Self-respect, inner stability, emotional independence, the ability to appreciate others without needing them to complete you. Most people choose the first door without realizing it. They spend decades there. But the Stoics invite us to choose differently. They invite us to build a life so rooted in internal values that external circumstances lose their power to shake us. One of the greatest misconceptions about Stoicism is that it teaches emotional coldness. It does not. Stoicism teaches emotional mastery. There is a massive difference. The Stoic does not stop caring about people. The Stoic simply refuses to become enslaved by outcomes. They love deeply while understanding that nothing external is guaranteed. They give generously without expecting specific returns. They appreciate relationships without turning them into emotional dependencies. This mindset creates a remarkable paradox. The less desperately you cling to people, the healthier your relationships often become. Why? Because genuine connection thrives in freedom, not control. There is a story about a young man who spent years trying to win the respect of a father who rarely showed approval. Every achievement became another attempt to earn validation. Every success became another audition. He worked harder. He achieved more. He sacrificed more. Yet the approval he sought remained inconsistent. Eventually he realized something profound. The goal was never really his father's approval. The goal was freedom from needing it. Once he stopped chasing validation, he experienced something he had not felt in years. Peace. Not because his father changed, but because he changed. The chains had never been external. They had always been internal. This lesson extends far beyond family relationships. It applies to friendships, careers, romantic relationships, and social status. Many people spend their lives trying to prove themselves. They chase promotions to feel worthy. They chase popularity to feel accepted. They chase relationships to feel complete. They chase achievements to feel significant. Yet every accomplishment creates a temporary high followed by another craving, another mountain to climb, another target to reach. The cycle never ends because the problem was never the absence of achievement. The problem was the belief that worth existed somewhere outside themselves. The Stoics understood that true confidence cannot be borrowed from external sources. It must be built from within. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, confidence grows. Every time you act according to your principles despite discomfort, confidence grows. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, confidence grows. This type of confidence is different because nobody can take it away. It does not depend on applause. It does not depend on popularity. It does not depend on approval. It is earned through character. And here is the surprising truth most people discover too late. The moment you stop chasing people, many of the things you wanted begin to come naturally. Respect grows when you respect yourself. Attraction grows when you stop seeking validation. Influence grows when you stop trying to control everyone. Opportunities grow when your energy shifts from pursuit to self-development. But even if they do not, you still win because your happiness is no longer hostage to external outcomes. You become free. And freedom, according to the Stoics, is one of the highest forms of wealth a human being can possess. Yet there is one deeper layer to this lesson that most people never explore. It is the hidden reason why chasing becomes addictive in the first place. And once you understand that hidden mechanism, you will never look at approval, attention, or validation the same way again. The hidden mechanism is surprisingly simple. Every time someone gives us attention, approval, affection, or recognition, the brain rewards us with a small emotional rush. It feels good. It feels validating. It feels like proof that we matter. The problem is that many people slowly become dependent on that feeling. They stop generating self-worth internally and begin outsourcing it to the reactions of others. This creates an emotional addiction that is difficult to detect because it often disguises itself as love, ambition, loyalty, or kindness. But underneath those labels there is frequently a deeper fear operating in the shadows. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being forgotten. The fear of being rejected. The fear of standing alone. When people chase others, they are often running from these fears rather than moving toward genuine connection. Epictetus would have recognized this immediately. He taught that no person can disturb us unless we first give them permission. At first that idea sounds impossible. How can another person's actions not affect us? How can rejection not hurt? How can betrayal not sting? The Stoics never claimed that painful events would stop hurting. They claimed something far more powerful. They taught that pain is unavoidable, but suffering is often amplified by the meaning we attach to events. When someone leaves, the event itself is painful, but then the mind begins adding stories. Maybe I'm not attractive enough. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe nobody will ever love me. Maybe I always fail. The original pain becomes multiplied by layers of interpretation. Before long, the person is suffering not only from reality, but also from their own conclusions about reality. This is why two people can experience the exact same rejection and emerge with completely different outcomes. One person becomes bitter, insecure, and emotionally dependent. The other becomes wiser, stronger, and more self-aware. The difference is not the event. The difference is the philosophy they bring to the event. One sees rejection as evidence of personal inadequacy. The other sees it as information. One collapses. The other adapts. One keeps chasing. The other keeps growing. Think about nature for a moment. A mountain does not beg to be admired. An ocean does not chase approval. A tree does not shrink itself to satisfy every passing opinion. These things simply exist according to their nature. They remain what they are regardless of who notices. Human beings often lose this natural strength Because they become obsessed with perception. They spend so much energy managing how they appear that they forget who they actually are. The Stoics repeatedly warned against this trap. They believed that character mattered more than reputation, because reputation belongs to other people while character belongs to you. Imagine waking up tomorrow completely free from the need to impress anyone. Not because you stopped caring about people, but because your sense of worth no longer depended on their approval. How would you speak differently? How would you walk differently? What decisions would you make? Which opportunities would you pursue? Which toxic relationships would you leave behind? Which dreams would finally receive your full attention? For many people, the answers are shocking. Entire lives are being shaped by the fear of judgment. Entire futures are being delayed by the desire for validation. Entire identities are being sacrificed to maintain acceptance. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself because even he struggled with these realities. He understood that the human mind constantly drifts toward external concerns. It wants praise. It wants recognition. It wants certainty. Yet life rarely provides permanent versions of those things. Fame fades. Relationships change. Circumstances shift. Public opinion reverses overnight. If your happiness depends on unstable foundations, your emotional state becomes unstable as well. The Stoic solution is not withdrawal from life. The solution is building your foundation on something stronger than circumstances. One modern example comes from entrepreneurs who spend years building businesses. At first, many are driven by passion and purpose. Then something changes. They begin comparing themselves to competitors. They become obsessed with recognition. Every success feels smaller because someone else achieved more. Every accomplishment loses meaning because there is always another benchmark. What started as creation becomes comparison. What started as fulfillment becomes anxiety. The external world begins dictating their internal state. Yet the entrepreneurs who maintain long-term satisfaction tend to share a common trait. They focus primarily on process rather than applause. They derive meaning from effort rather than recognition. They are motivated by growth rather than validation. This principle applies equally to relationships. Healthy relationships are built on mutual appreciation. Unhealthy relationships are often built on emotional dependency. Appreciation says, "I value your presence in my life." Dependency says, "I need your presence to feel okay." Appreciation creates freedom. Dependency creates fear. And fear inevitably leads to chasing. The more someone fears losing another person, the more likely they are to abandon themselves in an attempt to keep them. They ignore boundaries. They tolerate disrespect. They compromise values. They become smaller versions of themselves. Ironically, the very qualities that made them attractive in the beginning begin to disappear. The Stoics believed that self-respect is non-negotiable. Not because they were proud, but because they understood a fundamental truth. If you continuously betray yourself to gain acceptance, you eventually lose both acceptance and self-respect. And of the two, self-respect is far more valuable. There is tremendous strength in being able to say, "I would rather stand alone with my principles than abandon them for approval." That sentence sounds simple. Living it is one of the greatest challenges a person can face. There is another reason chasing is dangerous. It distracts you from your own potential. Every hour spent obsessing over someone else's choices is an hour not invested in your own growth. Every ounce of energy spent seeking validation is energy unavailable for self-improvement. Every emotional spiral triggered by external events steals attention from the life you are capable of building. Imagine if all the energy people spend worrying about being chosen were redirected toward becoming extraordinary. Imagine if every moment spent seeking approval became a moment spent developing skills, building health, strengthening character, or pursuing meaningful goals. Entire lives would transform. This is why the Stoics consistently emphasize discipline. Discipline is not merely about productivity. It is about reclaiming control of your attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Wherever attention goes, life follows. If your attention is trapped in the opinions of others, your life becomes trapped there as well. If your attention is invested in growth, purpose, and character, your life begins moving in that direction. Consider a person who spends 5 years chasing someone who never fully commits. 5 years of uncertainty, 5 years of emotional highs and lows, 5 years of waiting for a different outcome. Now imagine another person who experiences the same rejection, but decides to invest those years differently. They read, they learn, they train, they build, they heal. They develop confidence from competence rather than approval. 5 years later, the difference between these two lives is staggering. One remained trapped in pursuit. The other became transformed through purpose. What makes this lesson so powerful is that it extends beyond romantic relationships. Many people chase audiences. Many chase status. Many chase popularity. Many chase social approval. Many chase an image of success designed by someone else. Yet none of these pursuits guarantee fulfillment. In fact, many people achieve exactly what they thought they wanted only to discover that the emptiness remains. The applause arrives. The title arrives. The recognition arrives. But peace does not. Why? Because peace was never hiding inside those achievements. Peace was waiting in the relationship they had with themselves. Seneca often reminded himself that life is shorter than people realize. This awareness changes everything. When you truly understand that time is limited, endless chasing begins to look absurd. Why spend precious years convincing others to see your value when you could spend those years expressing it? Why waste your life demanding appreciation from people unwilling to give it? Why build your emotional world around circumstances you cannot control? Mortality has a way of clarifying priorities. It strips away illusions. It forces us to ask what genuinely matters. And perhaps the most important answer is this. What genuinely matters is who you become, not who approves of you. Not who validates you, not who applauds you, who you become. Character remains when circumstances change. Wisdom remains when relationships end. Discipline remains when motivation disappears. Integrity remains when recognition fades. These are the possessions that cannot easily be taken away. There is a story about a man who spent years feeling invisible. He believed that if enough people noticed him, respected him, and admired him, his life would finally feel meaningful, so he chased success relentlessly. He achieved more than most people ever will. Yet he remained unhappy. Eventually, exhausted by the pursuit, he stopped focusing on how others viewed him and started focusing on how he viewed himself. For the first time, he asked different questions. Am I living according to my values? Am I acting with courage? Am I becoming wiser? Am I contributing something meaningful? Those questions changed everything. Because unlike public opinion, they were entirely within his control. This shift represents the heart of Stoic philosophy. Stop measuring yourself by outcomes you cannot fully control. Measure yourself by actions you can control. Stop asking whether everyone approves of you. Ask whether you approve of your own conduct. Stop asking whether life is being fair. Ask whether you are responding wisely. Stop asking whether people recognize your value. Ask whether you are expressing your value through your behavior. Something remarkable happens when people adopt this mindset. They become less reactive, less needy, less fearful, less dependent. They stop chasing because they realize their energy has a higher purpose. They begin creating rather than pursuing, building rather than begging, growing rather than grasping. And this transformation is visible. It changes posture. It changes communication. It changes decisions. It changes relationships. People often describe it as confidence, but that word barely captures its depth. It is closer to inner freedom. And yet there remains one final Stoic lesson that ties everything together. It is the lesson that separates temporary motivation from lasting transformation. It is the reason some people hear these ideas and change forever, while others return to old patterns within days. Understanding this final lesson may be the difference between merely admiring Stoic wisdom and actually living it. The final lesson is this: Your life moves in the direction of what you repeatedly practice. Most people believe transformation happens through a single realization, a powerful moment of insight, or one life-changing decision. Those moments matter, but they are rarely enough. The truth is that every day you either strengthen your dependence on external validation or strengthen your independence from it. Every day you rehearse a way of living. Every day you train your mind to respond in a certain way. If you constantly check whether someone has replied, you are practicing dependence. If you repeatedly seek reassurance before making decisions, you are practicing dependence. If your mood rises and falls based on the opinions of others, you are practicing dependence. Over time, these behaviors become habits, and those habits become identity. Eventually, people no longer feel like they are choosing these patterns. They feel trapped by them. The Stoics understood that freedom is not a gift. It is a discipline. It is something that must be practiced consistently. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up one morning immune to criticism. Seneca did not suddenly become detached from fear. Epictetus did not magically transcend emotional struggles. They trained their minds repeatedly. They challenged their assumptions. They questioned their impulses. They reminded themselves daily of what truly mattered. They understood that mastery is built through repetition. Imagine someone standing in front of a mirror every morning. For years they have measured their worth through other people. Every compliment becomes proof they are valuable. Every criticism becomes proof they are failing. Every rejection becomes evidence that something is wrong with them. Now imagine that same person deciding to change, not through dramatic declarations but through daily choices. They stop checking for validation every few minutes. They stop explaining themselves to people determined to misunderstand them. They stop begging for attention from those who offer only indifference. They stop abandoning their values to avoid disapproval. At first it feels uncomfortable. In fact, it may feel terrifying, because dependence often disguises itself as security. Letting go can feel like losing something important. But over time, a strange thing happens. The discomfort begins to fade. The need weakens. The mind grows quieter. The person starts discovering who they are without constant external reinforcement. Many people never experience this freedom because they mistake attachment for love. They mistake approval for respect. They mistake attention for connection. But true connection does not require self-abandonment. Real respect does not require constant performance. Genuine love does not require endless chasing. The healthiest relationships emerge when two complete individuals choose to share their lives, not when two incomplete individuals try to fill each other's emptiness. This is one of the most misunderstood truths in modern culture. People are taught to search endlessly for someone who will complete them, save them, validate them, or heal them. Yet the Stoics would argue that your primary responsibility is to become whole within yourself. This does not mean isolation. It does not mean rejecting relationships. It means entering relationships from strength rather than desperation. There is an enormous difference. When you are emotionally dependent, every disagreement feels threatening. Every delay feels personal. Every change feels catastrophic. But when you are emotionally grounded, you can appreciate people without clinging to them. You can love without losing yourself. You can care deeply without surrendering your peace. This balance is rare because it requires self-awareness, discipline, and courage. Yet it is also one of the most rewarding states a person can achieve. Think about the people who command the most respect in life. They are rarely the ones desperately seeking attention. They are rarely the loudest voices in the room. They are rarely the people constantly proving their value. More often, they possess a quiet certainty. They know who they are. They know what they stand for. They are comfortable walking away from what does not align with their values. Their confidence does not come from external applause. It comes from internal alignment. They have earned trust in themselves. There is tremendous power in becoming the kind of person who no longer needs every door to open. The kind of person who no longer needs every individual to approve. The kind of person who no longer needs every outcome to unfold exactly as planned. Because once you stop demanding certainty from life, you become resilient enough to handle uncertainty. And resilience is one of the greatest advantages anyone can possess. Life will always contain rejection. Life will always contain disappointment. Life will always contain loss. No philosophy can remove these realities, but Stoicism teaches you how to meet them without being destroyed by them. Consider how many people remain trapped in situations that no longer serve them simply because they fear being alone. They stay in unhealthy relationships. They remain in environments that crush their spirit. They tolerate disrespect they would never advise others to accept. They continue chasing because they believe the alternative is loneliness. Yet what they often discover when they finally let go is something unexpected. The loneliness they feared was temporary. The self-betrayal they were living with was permanent. Once they reclaim their self-respect, they realize that solitude is far less painful than constantly abandoning themselves. The ancient Stoics repeatedly returned to the concept of virtue because they believed it was the only foundation capable of surviving life's inevitable changes. Wealth can disappear, beauty fades, status fluctuates, relationships evolve, public opinion shifts, but character remains. Character travels with you through every season of life. Character protects you when circumstances become difficult. Character allows you to maintain dignity when everything else feels uncertain. This is why the Stoics viewed virtue not as a moral obligation, but as a practical strategy for living well. Imagine two people facing the same setback. Both lose something important. Both experience disappointment. Both encounter uncertainty. One person immediately seeks validation, reassurance, and external comfort. Their emotional state becomes completely dependent on how others respond. The second person experiences the same pain but turns inward. They ask themselves what can be learned. They ask themselves what remains within their control. They focus on their response rather than the event. Which person do you think emerges stronger? Which person develops resilience? Which person becomes capable of handling greater challenges in the future? The answer is obvious. Yet most people continue choosing the first path because it feels easier in the moment. Growth rarely feels comfortable. Letting go rarely feels comfortable. Choosing self-respect over approval rarely feels comfortable, but comfort has never been the highest goal. The Stoics understood that a meaningful life often requires temporary discomfort. The discomfort of discipline. The discomfort of honesty. The discomfort of standing alone when necessary. These moments feel difficult precisely because they demand growth. They require you to become someone stronger than the version of yourself that existed before. One day, if you continue chasing people, approval, and validation, you may wake up and realize years have passed. You may discover that enormous amounts of time were spent pursuing things that never truly belonged to you. You may recognize that while you were busy seeking acceptance, life itself was moving forward. Opportunities disappeared. Potential remained unexplored. Dreams stayed dormant, not because you lacked talent or intelligence, but because your attention was invested elsewhere. This realization can be painful, yet it can also be liberating, because the moment you become aware of the pattern is the moment you can begin changing it. Right now, there may be someone you are chasing, someone whose attention seems to determine your mood, someone whose approval feels necessary, someone whose response carries too much weight in your emotional world. Or perhaps it is not a person. Perhaps it is status, recognition, popularity, success. Whatever form it takes, ask yourself a simple question. What would happen if I stopped chasing? Not what would happen to them. What would happen to me? What energy would be freed? What opportunities would appear? What strengths would emerge? What peace might become possible? The answer may surprise you, because often the thing standing between a person and freedom is not another individual. It is the belief that they need that individual to be complete. Once that belief dissolves, everything changes. The fear weakens. The desperation fades. The chasing stops. And in the space left behind, something far more valuable begins to grow. Self-respect grows. Clarity grows. Confidence grows. Purpose grows. Inner peace grows. This is why the Stoics repeatedly emphasized returning to yourself, not in a selfish sense but in a foundational sense. They understood that a person disconnected from themselves will spend their life seeking externally what can only be developed internally. They will search for confidence and admiration. They will search for peace and approval. They will search for worth and recognition. Yet none of those pursuits can permanently satisfy because they are all dependent on factors beyond one's control. The greatest transformation begins when you reverse the process. Build confidence through action. Build peace through perspective. Build worth through character. Build purpose through contribution. Once these foundations are established, relationships become healthier because they are no longer burdened with impossible expectations. Success becomes more meaningful because it is no longer serving as compensation for insecurity. Life becomes more stable because your emotional state is no longer tied to circumstances you cannot control. Years from now, you will not regret the people who failed to recognize your value, nearly as much as you will regret the moments when you failed to recognize it yourself. You will not regret every opportunity to chase. You will regret every opportunity to grow that was sacrificed for chasing. You will not regret walking away from what consistently diminished your self-respect. You will regret the times you stayed too long hoping someone else would finally become who they had repeatedly shown you they were not. The Stoics left us with a timeless invitation. Stop trying to control what belongs to others. Stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world. Stop outsourcing your worth to external opinions. Stop chasing what runs away. Instead, direct that energy inward. Strengthen your character. Refine your mind. Honor your values. Build a life so meaningful that validation becomes unnecessary. Become the kind of person whose confidence is rooted in conduct, whose peace is rooted in perspective, and whose strength is rooted in self-mastery. Because in the end, the people who change their lives are not the people who successfully chase everything they want. They are the people who learn what is worth chasing and what is worth releasing. They are the people who stop running after approval and start walking toward purpose. They are the people who understand that real power begins the moment dependence ends. And if there is one lesson to remember from everything you have heard, let it be this. The moment you stop chasing people is often the moment you finally start finding yourself. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where in your life you may still be seeking validation from people, outcomes, or circumstances beyond your control. Then make a decision. Not tomorrow, not someday, today. Choose self-respect over approval. Choose growth over chasing. Choose purpose over dependency. And most importantly, choose the version of yourself that no longer needs permission to recognize its own worth. That choice may not change your life overnight, but it can absolutely change the direction of your life forever.